Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the New Year's episode of the Spooky Second podcast with your host, the Alfred State Paranormal Investigation and Urban Exploration Club. This week, three of our members, JD, the club president, Liz, the vice president, and Molly, the public relations officer, will be talking to our guest, Amanda Woomer from Amanda is the creator of a very successful blog called Spook Eats, which is about traveling to and sometimes eating at haunted locations. She has also written a couple of books about haunted travels, including The Haunted Atlas of Western New York. Okay, let's get this started. So, when did you first get into paranormal investigating and researching haunted locations?
So for me, I always say that kind of like my origin story of sorts goes back to when I was a little girl. I think so many people who are in the paranormal have an experience when they were younger. Usually they experienced something, they saw something, things like that. And so for me, I saw an apparition basically when I was about 7 years old. I was in my bed at my parents' house, and I saw an old woman walking through the hallway, and there was no old woman in our house, obviously. And she was walking through the hallway, and she was kind of dressed in like a bathrobe, and she had slippers on and crazy bedhead. And I just remember that she turned and she looked at me for, it was probably only like a second or two, but it felt much longer than that, obviously, before she continued into what is our linen closet. And it only took about a second or two before I just screamed bloody murder for my mom. And she actually ran through the old woman. She did not see her. I saw her run through her, though. And of course, she tries to convince me, oh, it was just a dream, blah, blah, blah. And I knew, like, I was wide awake. It wasn't a dream. She was very much real. Didn't really think anything of it ever again. I never saw her again. I never felt like I grew up in a haunted house. I always felt very comfortable, never really saw anything else. It wasn't until I was about 17 or 18 years old when my parents finally admitted that the previous owner of our house before we bought it was an old woman, and she died in the house, and her bedroom happened to be my bedroom. So I'm very happy that that my parents didn't share that with me until I was older. And as I was about to move out of the house, thank goodness. But again, I never really felt like I lived in a haunted house or anything, but that definitely sparked an interest for me. You go to the library, this is before the internet, obviously. It was way back in the 90s, to date myself. So I would go to the library and get books out on, ghosts and UFOs and cryptids and all of that stuff. And eventually the show Ghost Hunters came out, and that was, I think, for so many people, at least my age, who's late 20s, early to mid 30s, I think Ghost Hunters was really kind of that inspiration to kind of like let your freak flag fly, and it's okay to investigate these things and look more into these things. So around when I was about 13, 14 years old, I really started taking it a bit more seriously and, started going to places that I considered to be haunted. Usually that ended up being local cemeteries and stuff. And I would take a tape recorder, again, dating myself, a tape recorder, not a digital recorder. And, doing little EVP sessions and stuff, and, taking cameras and taking pictures and see if, you caught anything. Of course, back in those days, you had to take them to, the store and get the film developed, and then it comes back and you don't get anything. Nowadays, digital is great. So up until then, it was really like an innocent curiosity. Then, to be the downer very quickly in this, in 2015, my younger brother passed away after a battle with pediatric cancer. And it was his passing that really took my innocent curiosity of the paranormal and just transformed it into just a very deep-seated passion that has really been the driving force of my life since then. Basically that was the birth of Spook Eats. He and I were both very interested in the paranormal. We visited places like Gettysburg and Salem and Key West, those cities that are, the haunted cities of America. And for me, after he passed away, like, I know a lot of people, they'll turn to religion and going to church as a way to really cope with their grief and to find answers. And for me, that didn't happen for me. I was not blessed, I guess, with a very deep faith in what comes next. I was very much doubtful that everything that I had been raised with at Sunday school was, true or authentic. So I really turned to the paranormal. And by finding evidence that way, whether it was photographs or EVPs or things like that, that was how I really found comfort. And I figured I can't be the only person that has lost someone and then wonders what comes next. I can't be the only one. I know that I'm not. But so many times haunted locations are very difficult to access, especially for your average everyday person. Sometimes you have to be a part of a well-established group, or you have to have a pretty decent amount of money that
Mm.
you're willing to spend to get into these locations. Very, very difficult to access. So I wanted to create kind of a guide for your average everyday person that is looking for an opportunity to experience haunted locations. And that's where Spook Eats came from. It is haunted hospitality. So restaurants, bars, hotels, anything like that that's already open to the public. They want you to come and visit them. And a lot of times they have just as much history as these infamous places that you see on TV. And in my opinion, they're a far more enjoyable experience because they'll have heat, they'll have electricity, running water, bathrooms, much less food and drink. So that was kind of really the birth of Spook Eats. It came from a tragedy of losing my brother, and I just tried to transform it into a way to help other people kind of have their own paranormal journeys and come to their own conclusions about life and death and what could potentially come next. Long-winded answer.
So would it be more of like trying to prove that there is another side, or is it more like you guys had this interest, so you want to keep going with the interest and like?
For me, I think it's more so trying to find evidence that consciousness or a soul or a spirit or something continues on after we die. Um, you know, it could be partly that, it was something that my brother and I did enjoy doing as we were
Mm.
growing up. But I think more so it helps me get to sleep at night. It sounds strange, but like that's what helps me get to sleep at night is knowing like I have this tangible evidence that I can share with other people that you really can't explain it. It's kind of weird. It's paranormal. You can't find a logical explanation for it. And that's what I think really is helpful for me in my healing process. And I have found that sharing it with other people or hosting public ghost hunting events and letting your average everyday person who might just be casually interested in hauntings and ghost stories, they have a chance to experience it as well, could also help them if they're grieving or if it's coming down the pike and, they're about to lose someone or, everyone experiences death at some point in their life. And I'm always a fan of being able to come to your own conclusions.
Mm.
I think the paranormal is one of those fields that constantly changing, it's constantly evolving. There's all these new ideas and theories coming out all the time. And I never liked being told what to think or what to believe in the paranormal. You see so many TV shows out there that they say like, this is what it is. And it's like, but it might not be. So I really like giving people kind of the guide or a roadmap to be like, here are the places that you should go visit, go have your own experience and come back with your own conclusions on the matter.
So, regarding your brother, did you see him after he passed, or do you continue to see him?
So for me, the first year that after my brother Jed passed away, I had experiences, I won't say on a daily basis, but fairly consistently, where I would see, it was weird, I would see plumes of smoke. That was the thing that I would see with him a lot. They would be about this big, and I would see them, not even from the corner of my eye, but like I would see them kind of like hovering in different places throughout my parents' house where I was staying at the time. And so I thought that was very interesting. Shortly after he passed away, I did get married and I moved to Russia for a very short time. That was fun. But while I was over in Russia, I also saw these plumes of smoke while I was there. So I knew it wasn't the house, it was me that I was seeing these things. And I did get like a few signs here and there. But it wasn't anything substantial until around Christmas time, the year that he passed away, which was 2015. And I was at a local theater that I work there a lot. I've been a member for 15 years now. I do a lot of public ghost hunts there. And I was doing a show, and I was actually playing the role that my brother was intended to play. And we were finishing opening night. We were doing the curtain call, taking our bows, and at the end of it, we would exit down the stairs, and everyone's out on stage except for the stage manager. So my dad's the first one down the stairs, and I'm right behind him. And I see someone from the corner of my eye walking towards the ghost light, about to turn it back on. Tall young man, I think it's the stage manager. So as we're turning into the back room, there's the stage manager, and he's giving everyone high fives. And I'm thinking, like, oh my gosh, I did not just see the stage manager. I saw Jed. I saw my brother. He was much skinnier than him, much taller, kind of had his swagger gait. So that was the first time that I saw him. Also on a ghost hunt at the Ghost Light Theater, one of the first ones we ever conducted, someone got a photograph of him. And it is uncanny. It's absolutely amazing. I'm not lucky enough to ever capture things on film or on cameras. So my one friend who just had her phone was snapping pictures, and she got a photograph of him. And that same night, I captured an EVP that sounds like his voice, that matches the photo, and it's in the exact same place at the exact same night that the photo was taken. So I thought that was really interesting. And then just very recently, back around Christmas time, so just a couple weeks ago, I was actually at the theater again. I see him at the theater a lot. I think that's what, like, kind of his anchor to here. And I was on stage working on something, and I hear someone calling my name. I hear Amanda, Amanda, and I actually turned to look, and I was like, what? And I was assuming it was my mom or someone, and then I realized, like, everyone else is, like, no one else is back, back towards the backstage area of the theater. Everyone else is out in the auditorium. No one is here. And I realized, like, oh my gosh, this is Jed. This is my brother. And I've actually realized that he is very strong, I guess, for lack of a better term, around the holidays. His birthday is December 23rd. So it's his birthday, then it's Christmas Eve, then it's Christmas. He loved the holidays. So I find, like, a lot of people say, the veil is thinnest at Christmas, or not Christmas time, Halloween. But for me, I definitely have found that he makes contact at Christmas time, which is kind of cool, because I'm not a huge Christmas fan, but if, like, it makes, getting messages from my brother, I'm like, oh, I'll take Christmas, I guess. So I've definitely seen him. I've had dreams with him. We've gotten photographs of him in EVPs. So he's definitely, I feel like he's definitely still around. And if any silver lining can be found in the whole situation, it is that I don't think I would have created Spook Eats if it wasn't for his passing. So, if you have to find a blessing in disguise or a silver lining, that is it. I would prefer to never have started Spook Eats and still have my brother here. But if him passing and the creation of Spook Eats kind of helps other people explore the paranormal and helps them in their grieving process, then I won't say it's worth it, but it makes it bearable.
Yeah, definitely. What would you say your favorite place you've ever investigated or ever went to is?
I mean, I always say the Ghost Light Theater in North Tonawanda, just because that is where I've had the most experiences. That's where I've seen my brother. That's where I host these ghost hunts. So I've been there so much that I've had so many experiences. But to, like, spice things up a little bit and not just go with the Ghost Light Theater, I actually, back in 2019 now, I went on a trip to the United Kingdom. And we spent several days up in Edinburgh, and it's an amazing city. Absolutely loved Scotland. It's one of my favorite countries on the planet now. And we actually got a chance to go down into the Edinburgh vaults. Super, super cool. It's the weirdest thing. Like you go down these flights of stairs, and it actually gets boiling hot, not cold, like you would expect. You're underground. It's very strange. But while we were down there, it was just very claustrophobic. And I was down there with my father, my father is the ultimate skeptic. And I love having him around because he's the skeptic. I need a skeptic to kind of keep me in check. I like to think I'm a healthy skeptic, but he's like mega skeptic. And we're going around, and you hear the stories of like the night watchman, and he likes to lurk around the perimeter, and some people see him, some people don't. And I don't experience anything, but it's just an amazing location, just for the history of it, the dark history. And as we're leaving, I asked my dad, well, what did you think? And he goes, it was interesting. I think I saw something. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, while he was, standing kind of a little ways back from the rest of our little group, he saw someone in what he describes as kind of like a big trench coat and like a wide brimmed hat. And he kind of looked, saw him, thought, okay, whatever. And then he was like, wait, what the heck? And he turned and looked back, and nothing was there. So he was like, that was freaky. I'm going to stick closer to the group now. So he got a little bit closer to the rest of us. And several minutes later, he said that he felt a hand, he has long hippie hair. So he said he felt someone brush his hair back over his ear. And at that point, he was like, this is weird. I'm good to go. So for me, the Edinburgh Vaults, not so much for my experience, but for the fact that my dad had an experience that could potentially make him a believer. I don't know if it's happened yet, but it was the coolest thing. If anyone ever gets a chance to go to Scotland, obviously Edinburgh's at the top of the list. And if you get a chance to go down to the vaults, it's wild. It's so unlike anything else that I've ever been to before. It's really cool. It's really weird. So that and the Ghost Light Theater are my two favorites. I cheated. I picked two.
I just made borscht for dinner, so I really I really like Russia, although I've never been. So I'm curious if you've had your experiences there.
So I was there for a very short time. My husband and we used to be international English teachers. So we actually met in China, moved to Russia at some point, and then we went to Mongolia for a short while before moving back to the States. And in Russia, most of my experiences did revolve around my apartment and my brother. But there was two instances that I thought were very interesting. And they were, I never had time, unfortunately, to go and seek out supposedly haunted locations in Russia, because they worked me like a dog while I was over there. But these two instances that were really interesting. The first was my husband and we were hiking through just a random forest. I don't even know how we found it. And we were walking, and it's a huge expansive park, I guess, but it's a forested area, and I didn't see anyone for the longest time. And we finally saw this old man, and he was this tall, skinny old man, bald head, and he had a plaid shirt on, kind of like what I have on right now, walking with his hands behind his back. And I thought for a second, I was like, oh my gosh, my poppy, my grandfather, he used to walk like that. He actually looks a lot like my grandfather. And we followed behind him for a few minutes and stuff, probably, I don't know, 50 yards behind him or something. And at some point, I'm watching him because it's just nostalgic to be like, oh, he reminds me of my grandfather. And he kind of turns a bend by this big tree, and he never comes out on the other side of this tree, and the path just continues. And I was like, that's really weird. So I was like, oh, he must be stopping to sit by the tree. So we continue on the path, and we get to the tree, and he's nowhere to be seen. We never see him again. And so in my heart, I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if that was my grandfather. I don't know. Of course, my students then go oh, you can't go into the forest at that time. It's not safe. The ghost, blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, okay, yeah, thanks. But the other thing that happened that was absolutely amazing was it was 6 months to the day that my brother had passed away. And his whole life symbols for him were acorns. An acorn was kind of like his good luck charm. When he passed away, he had an acorn in his hand. That was his good luck charm that he had with him. I have an acorn tattooed on the side of my head. So like acorns are a big thing. So while I was walking to work on the 6-month anniversary of him passing away, I was walking through the snow because it's Russia and there's snow. And I'm walking and I look down and I see something and I keep walking. And after like a second or two, I stop and I turn around and I go back. And I look at the ground and it is an orange plastic acorn just lying in the snow. And I was like, I don't know if this is a sign or not, but it's really weird that orange was his favorite color. It's an acorn. It's here on the 6-month anniversary of him passing away. I pick it up and I take a picture of it. I put it in my pocket. After I look back at the photo several days later, I realized it was to the minute that he had passed away. So I thought that was really weird. I actually still have the acorn. It's over on my bookshelf right now. It was just one of those things that I'm not a huge proponent of like signs like, pennies from heaven or, a butterfly is a sign that it's your loved one. I'm not a huge fan of that. I need more than that. But for me, I was like, you know what? I needed that day, as I was being forced to go to work on the 6-month anniversary of him passing away, and finding an orange plastic acorn in the snow in Russia, in Siberia, is exactly what I needed. And in that moment, I felt like he was with me. I was thinking of him, so he was with me. So those were my 2 experiences while I was over in Russia. It's definitely not the paranormal experiences I would have liked to have had. I would have loved to have been able to actually like go to locations, but the work schedule was just horrible, which is why we left.
So, out of your travels, what was your favorite story that you've heard at a location?
Oh gosh. For me, it would probably. I've been to many places. Probably. I want to say the city of York in England as a whole. It's known as the city of 1,000 ghosts, and it's considered by many to be the most haunted city in Europe and possibly the most haunted city in the whole world. It's an awesome city. I mean, it's ancient. It's a walled city. The Vikings were there, very medieval. They have a street there called the Shambles that was actually the inspiration for Diagon Alley in Harry Potter, which you look at it and you're like, yes, this looks like Diagon Alley. This is ridiculous. But for me, they had a lot of haunted pubs, which being Spook Eats, where I focus on haunted hospitality, I'm going to sign up for the pubs all day, every day. So one of these pubs was called the Golden Fleece, and it's actually at the base of the Shambles. And the Shambles used to be where the butchers were. So supposedly, they would butcher the animals, and basically blood would run down the Shambles and end at the Golden Fleece. So there would be a puddle of blood in front of the Golden Fleece. It's very charming. And while I was in there, the bartender basically told me about this. There was a human head sitting on the table at the bar. And he was like, oh yeah, this was a trader from, 15 whatever. And, he was beheaded and we have him here. And I was just like, why are we like in the States, you would never see anything like this, like a beheaded prisoner and their head is just left on the bar to be mummified and cheers, I guess. So for me, like, it was a haunted pub. So, but for me, it was just like, yeah, it was the weirdest thing. I've been to many places in my lifetime. I've eaten at a lot of strange places. I've eaten a lot of weird things, but I have never sipped on a pint of beer next to a human head. So that was the weirdest thing, if nothing else.
That's
So,
crazy.
the live stream cut it out, and so
Oh, it did?
So did the team here. I didn't hear what the shrunken is about. Um,
Was the head like in a jar?
It was
hold on,
in.
build itself back up.
The head was in like a case, like a wooden glass case. So it was right there.
Did it look like a head or like?
It was I wish I could like show the photos that I have of it. It was basically like a mummified head of sorts. Like it was kind of a gray brown color and like the hair was kind of reddish. I mean it was like the eyes were closed, thank God. Like and it was this head sitting, the box was probably about this big and it was just sitting on on the bar, and it's just like it was the weirdest thing. But I loved it. Like I feel like in America we don't really have history quite like that at all. So it was cool to kind of see that, and like the history there is just so great. So many times you would go to a pub and they would say, oh, well, this was built in the 1300s, but it's not the oldest one in town. And you're like, oh, of course. Why would it be the oldest one? Like, of course it wouldn't be the oldest. So it was nice to see such rich history there, and that they're not afraid to talk about their ghost stories. So many places would be proud and they would say, we're the most haunted pub in the area. Of course, there would be one right next to them and they'd be like, no, we're the most haunted pub. So it was nice to see kind of a competition like that, because here in America, I've found that so many times haunted locations, especially, hotels or restaurants, will try to hide the fact that they're haunted and try to downplay it. So it was like a breath of fresh air to go over to the UK and have them not only share it, but kind of like really be proud of it and kind of fight for the honor to be the most haunted pub in the area. And they do a great job at like preserving their history. I feel like so many times here in America, we have old buildings that they get torn down for, a Walmart or an apartment complex or an Applebee's. And it's just so painful when you think of it. There's this one restaurant up near Buffalo that's supposed to be one of the oldest buildings in Western New York. Parts of it date back to 1804, which by UK standards, that's not old at all. But by our standards, that's pretty darn old. And I used to visit it as a child, and it was very old-fashioned, the old wooden floors that would creak as you walked on it, and you could just see the history. And I went back recently, about a year or two ago, and they have gutted it. It is so modern and redone, and it's just a shame that it doesn't have its historical integrity anymore. It's still one of the oldest buildings in Western New York, but it doesn't look it anymore. It doesn't feel like that anymore. And like for me, whenever I visit a haunted restaurant, especially, I want to feel like I'm walking back in time, that it's like a time capsule, and it just totally envelops you. One of my favorite places I've visited in the States is the Farnsworth House down in Gettysburg. And I always tell people it's a time capsule. You walk in and you feel like you have walked back to the 19th century. It's dimly lit. It's decorated like it would be, the late 1800s. Even people working at the restaurant, they're dressed, in the Civil War era clothes. The food is inspired by the Civil War era. So it's really a great slice of history. And it's nice to see, because so many times I have encountered places that's not the case. Either they don't want to talk about it, or they've gutted it and they're trying to like revitalize themselves as something new. And I'm a history nerd, so I don't like that.
Do you have a favorite meal from one of the restaurants you visited?
So for me, I always have the same answer because nothing has ever topped this. It is called the Death Seat Burger, and it's at the Old Canal Inn in Nutley, New Jersey. So Nutley is about 40 minutes south of Manhattan, and Old Canal Inn, it is just, I say it with love, but it is a dive bar. I mean, it's like, it's dark when you walk in, just the locals are there. The ground is sticky from, decades of spilt beer. But at this old bar, they have this thing called the Death Seat. And basically it's this bar stool that is supposedly cursed. Back in around the 1940s and 1950s, there were two gentlemen that were kind of fighting over this one bar seat. It was at the front of the bar, right by the window. So it illuminated the area. It was the best seat in the house sort of thing. And so they were fighting over it, kind of frenemy style. And, the winner, he got to sit in the seat. And while he was sitting there at the bar, he keeled over. He had a heart attack and died right in the seat. So the next night, his buddy, who didn't get the seat, got to take that seat that night. And he had a heart attack. And he died. It's happened 4 times now that someone sitting in that seat has died of a heart attack. So now you can't sit in it, thank goodness. I'm sure the insurance company was like, we need to put a stop to this. So now it's kind of barred off. They actually have a plastic skeleton sitting in it. But it's cool to see because it's not reupholstered or anything. So it's the original red, kind of tattered and torn, leather seat cushion, and everything else is nice and modern, so that's the seat. But instead of kind of shying away from this curse, the current owners totally they cashed in on it. So they created the Death Seat Burger, which is a burger that has mashed potatoes, jalapenos, cheddar cheese on top, and then they beer batter it and they deep fry it. It's ridiculous. I tell people, I'm like, you have to Google this thing. It's a monster. It's ridiculous. It's only available on Mondays. So I always warn people, if you are planning on going, you have to go on a Monday in order to get this thing. It's ridiculous. And I am not a huge, crazy combo person when it comes to my food. I love this thing. I'm the type of person that's like, my meat's over here, my vegetables over there, my potatoes are over there. But this was all together. It was great. So I always tell people, feel free to share it with someone. That's what I did. I sliced it in half and shared it with someone. But it was great. And I always tell people, if you don't die of a heart attack from sitting in the death seat, you'll probably die of a heart attack from eating the Death Seat Burger. But that's hands down my favorite meal that I've had someplace, and it's not exorbitant. So many times you go to haunted locations and for whatever reason it's just so expensive. I don't know why. It drives me crazy. I've spent so much money at these locations. And it's not expensive. It's really good, really laid back environment. And you have this crazy story to go with it. So again, so many times places kind of shy away from their ghost stories, but these guys they jumped right in and they were just all in and said, yes, we have this crazy seat. Yes, we're haunted. Here's a burger to prove it. Have at it. So I love it. I'm looking at the newsfeed actually, and I see Karen, who I know Karen from Haunted Magazine. She asked if we have a favorite location in the UK, and if so, why that specific place. So food-wise for me, I know I mentioned the Golden Fleece, so I'm going to stick with that. I didn't get to eat any food there. But I had 3 beers while I was there. And the bartender actually was like, oh, this has 5% alcohol. You sure you want that? And I'm like, 5%? I'm American. I'm used to 6 or 7%. So absolutely loved the Golden Fleece. Trying to think if there's any other haunted restaurants that I know that I was at. We ate so many different locations. One place I loved actually was up in Scotland. In Stirling, Scotland, was Lord Darnley's. I know I'm butchering that because I don't have a fun Scottish accent. But basically, the husband of Mary, Queen of Scots, was Lord Darnley. And this cafe or tea house is in his old residence, and it's gorgeous. It's this cobblestone building, and it's this little tea house where you can get afternoon tea and millionaire bars, and which I'm obsessed with. And I loved it. It's haunted. So I would say either the Golden Fleece because of the beheaded person sitting next to me at the bar, or Lord Darnley's because of the millionaire bars.
Okay, so the death seat being a haunted object, you have met through Robert the Doll, right?
Yes, I have.
What was your experience with that haunted object?
So Robert the Doll, I've had a very long history with Robert the Doll. I first heard about him when I was probably about 10 years old. And from the minute I saw a photograph of him, I was absolutely petrified. The story scared the crap out of me. The image of him just terrified me. I was not a fan of Robert the Doll for the longest time. Fast forward about 10 years, and here I am. I was like 20, 21 years old, and I was still petrified of Robert the Doll. Every so often, I would just catch myself thinking of him and like panicking. It was ridiculous. At 20 years old, I would be laying in bed, and I would think, my gosh, if I open my eyes right now, Robert the Doll is going to be sitting at the foot of my bed. Like, that's how much he just invaded my thoughts. So finally, when I was 21 years old, I went back down to Key West. I had been down there many, many times. And I went there and I said, we have to go to the East Martello Museum. I'm demanding it so I can finally face my fear and face Robert the Doll. So we went to the museum. It's awesome. I believe it's a Civil War fort. And I went there and I faced my fear, and I met Robert, and he's not that scary. My biggest thing is I always tell people is just show respect. When I went to the museum and I was talking to the lady in the gift shop, she said, you just have to be respectful. Don't make fun of him. Don't poke fun. Don't take that risk. And for me, so many times I hear about haunted objects, and I don't necessarily put a lot of stock into them sometimes, but there is just something about Robert the Doll that I would rather be safe than sorry. And so when I go in, I'm going to compliment his little lion or tell him how cute he looks in his sailor outfit. I'm going to ask permission to take a photo with him because, you know what, there are way too many stories surrounding him and tragedies that befall the people that don't respect him that I'm not taking that chance. I'm not taking that risk. So for me now, I'm a huge Robert the Doll fangirl. Like, I love him. I'm like, oh, he's actually kind of cute. But for easily 10 years of my life, he haunted me. Not to be like punny or anything, like, oh, but I would catch myself thinking about him every so often and just be absolutely petrified. So the fact that I was able to actually go there and face my fears, and I still very much kind of revere him. Just again, I would rather be safe than sorry. I don't want to risk anything. But I'm a huge fan of Robert the Doll. I always tell people, if you're ever down in Florida, I know it's a big state, but if you can get down to the Keys, and in particular Key West is one of those fun cities that just has so much weird history, haunted or not. There's just some weird stuff that's gone on down there, but I mean that with like all the love in my heart. It's one of my favorite cities in the country. So yeah, if anyone ever gets the chance to go meet Robert the Doll, definitely do it. But just be on the safe side, ask permission, and have a good time with Robert the Doll. Maybe bring some peppermints too while you're at it.
Yeah, that's part of my ideologies also, is to respect the spirit, treat them as if they're another person. Also, my thing that kind of creeps me out like that, like you were talking with Robert the Doll, was the Momo
Oh
that came
gosh.
through social media. That was my...
Momo was ridiculous.
Terrifying.
I freaking hated Momo. Ugh.
I don't like the looks of it.
No.
No, but
Along the same lines.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask, what's the scariest experience you've ever had?
So for me, I have been very lucky in that I haven't had too many experiences that have been frightening. Of course, you have those moments that like make you jump and like your heart just starts pounding and stuff and your adrenaline's pumping. But I've always said to people, I've never been to a location where something has happened that has made me never want to go back. Luckily, knock on wood. But for me, my freakiest encounter that I had, I was actually at Iron Island Museum back 2 years ago now. COVID stole a year of my life. I was going to say last year. So 2 years ago. My gosh. So I used to own an escape room in the Buffalo area. And so Linda, who owns Iron Island, she wanted to do a sort of escape room experience at Iron Island as a sort of fundraiser in September of 2019. So I was working there, kind of like installing the escape room into the museum. And one of the days, I was there with her, but she had to leave for a short while. So I said, like, I have to keep working. This is opening tonight. Is it okay if I stay? And she was like, well, you're going to be by yourself. And I was like, well, that's fine. And she was like, are you sure? And finally I was like, should I not be? Like, I had been there before on investigations and stuff. And so I knew it was haunted. Obviously, I feel like it's one of the most haunted places in Western New York. It's been on TV. People know about Iron Island. So I was fine to stay by myself, and I was like, yeah, should I not stay by myself? Like, should I be afraid? But she was like, no, like, you can stay if you want. So she left. She actually locked me in, and I continued working. And one of the puzzles, I'm sure I can say this now, I don't know if the escape room's ever going to start back up again, but one of the final puzzles was in the chapel room, and it had to do with the Ouija board. Now, I'm kind of hit or miss when it comes to Ouija boards, but Linda really wanted to have a Ouija board in there. So I was like, all right, we'll put a puzzle. I mean, it's got letters and numbers. It's perfect for an escape room, decoding. So I was working in the chapel, and I just remember looking up at one point, and if anyone's familiar with Iron Island, you have the chapel with the beautiful altar, and there's a piano in that room. That's where the gift shop is. And then out in the hallway, there's this big round mirror. I don't like mirrors. It's one of my things that they freak me out. Ask Mr. Spook Eats. He hates that I hate mirrors because we only have one mirror in our house. I don't like them. They freak me out. And so as I was looking at this mirror, I don't want to say a shadow figure because I do think that's something different than a ghost, but it was a shadowy figure in the mirror. And it looked like it was kind of like dripping out of the mirror. I did not like that. I think because I was alone in a building by myself, locked in, I was petrified. So I like quickly like gathered all of my stuff up and just like really like briskly walked back to the kitchen area, which is kind of like the safe space where nothing happens. And I stayed in there until Linda came back. And I've been back since, and I haven't experienced anything like that. And like in hindsight, I wish I had like this sense about me to like, oh my gosh, snap a picture, like try to document this. This is amazing. But I think because I was alone, I was freaked out. But that for me was definitely like the scariest thing. And it was one of the few times I had seen something. I don't usually see things aside from seeing my brother at this local theater, which is a nice feeling. I like when that happens. So this was definitely unnerving, and I didn't like it. I have been back since, so it didn't scare me away too much. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's supposed to be something that's like negative about the Iron Island Museum because it was actually featured on one of the TV shows, the one with Katrina and.
Yeah, it was just on Portals to Hell.
So you filmed a documentary, right?
What was that? Sorry, my thing is cutting out.
Yeah, I'm having very bad internet right now. I try to hook up Ethernet, which usually performs better, but after that, it just
For the first time, my internet is not the problem.
So you published few books, and I am curious what you think the hardest part of writing and publishing a book is.
For me, the hardest part of the whole process is the editing process. I love researching. I love visiting the locations. I love the writing process of it. But having to like sit down and then like read through it to make sure everything's spelled right and everything, the grammar's correct and that everything
I'm
lines up
just
format
gonna.
wise.
Do you usually have an editor to help you with that?
I usually have my mom. She used to she used to be a copy editor. So she's pretty good about going through and like finding things for me. I will usually go through about 5 or 6 times of reading things, but eventually, I mean, you just get so dazed at looking at things. It's awful. So it's always nice to have a second pair of eyes, and she does. She catches tons of things. Like she'll give me a back a copy, like a hard copy, and like all of, like the dog-eared pages, and you're just like, oh my gosh, how did I miss all of that? So for me, it's done 99% on my own, and then my mom does help me out a little bit. But definitely, I always tell people, like, if you want to write something, find something that you're passionate about. Because I have so many friends that try to write things and they never finish it, or they finish it and they publish it, but then they don't work on promoting it. And that is hard. I self-published everything, so I don't have an agent, I don't have a publisher. So no one is promoting it except me. So you have to really be passionate about it and be willing to like bug people constantly into buying your books. So I always tell people, there's a difference between being a writer and being an author. I think so many people like writing, but there's an extra amount of work that goes into being an author and actually, finding a way for people to buy your books. And again, I think if you find that niche that, no one else is really writing about these things, no one else is really focusing on them, it can really give you a very specific audience. I think by doing haunted restaurants and bars, not a lot of people have highlighted things like that. You see so many things written about, Waverly Hills Asylum or, like those really famous haunted places, but it gets very, oversaturated after a while. Whereas, finding these haunted restaurants and these haunted hotels that people can go to is definitely something that not a lot of people talk about. So it does make a difference, I think, at least. It's been successful, so which I like.
So if you're self-publishing, who prints the books for you?
Unfortunately, I say technology is the absolute worst. It never works when you want it to. That is what I have learned.
Definitely.
So, but yeah, I publish everything through Amazon. Unfortunately, I hate Amazon, but it's the necessary evil in my life because everyone's always like, "Don't order from Amazon." And I was like, "Yeah, except my books. Order my books." So, but luckily, what I usually do is I get author copies. I actually have boxes behind me now, and then I sell them myself. So you get a little bit more because, like, I think with Amazon, like, I charge, for like the Haunted Atlas, I'll charge $18, and I think I only get like $3 from Amazon. Whereas like if I order a copy myself, it costs about $6 to get, and then I can charge the full $18 and get more out of it. But with COVID, it has not been helpful with that at all.
Right. For sure. So in one of your books, The Haunted Atlas of Western New York, you talk about our college, the Mackenzie Complex. Did you visit that yourself? Or were you just stories that you've heard?
So this was just stories that I had heard. I actually had a friend that she went to Alfred University on the other side of town. So I had heard stories from her a little bit here and there. And then I actually have the escape room that I own, or used to own, half of my employees. It was the weirdest thing. Half of them went to Alfred State and half of them went to Alfred University. It was the weirdest thing, where I was like, why are we all going to the same school? This is weird. But they actually came back and told me stories of the Mackenzie complex. And I was like, oh, I have to research this more, because I was in the middle of researching this book. And so it was kind of like this weird, like, serendipity coincidence sort of thing. So I myself haven't been there in person. But, like, it's been like, how many degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon? It's like, how many degrees of separation from the Mackenzie complex? So I had employees that had visited it, and I don't know if any of them actually were staying in there or if they knew someone that was staying in there, but they had all these stories for me. So it was kind of cool that I had people that knew about it. And it's always weird, like, not being a student, to, like, go to a campus to, like, explore. Like, I know, like, technically you can walk around, like, public places and stuff on campus, but it always feels weird because it's like, oh, I don't belong.
Yeah, I'm 24 and I'm still going to college, so I feel like out of place, just like that much.
Yeah, it's true. Like, I was in my university, I was there for a little bit longer, like super senior year. So I was like, oh, I'm like the mature adult. Now I look back and I was like, oh my God, I was like 22, 23. Like, shut up. Shut up, past Amanda.
Yeah, it's hard being like 23 and going to college with all these kids, and they're like, "You're so old." And I'm like, I'm like 4 years older than you, not that old.
Yeah, right. Yeah, now, like, I'm 30 now, and I was like, oh my gosh, I am old. I'm like the old lady.
So I think I'm kind of back in the meeting, but I'm not sure how long it's gonna last.
We can hear
Did you
you.
guys talk about the Steinham Castle?
No, I was just
CDC for.
I was asking her about our college, the Mackenzie complex. That was what I was asking her about.
And Spook Eats, I'm sorry about how it's working. Well, Amanda from
No.
Spook Eats, I'm sorry how it's working out.
It's okay. Again, I used to own a business that relied very heavily on electronics and equipment, and it never worked. Never worked when you needed it to.
So is Spook Eats your full-time or a side passion?
So right now, it's more of like a side hustle. With COVID closing the escape room permanently, it was like, oh no, I'm unemployed. What's gonna happen? But I'm luckily I had a baby in the middle of the pandemic, so now I can be like a stay-at-home mom sort of thing. So full-time job is trying to keep a baby alive. But on the side, especially books, I can write books during like nap time and stuff. So I'm hoping eventually it becomes more of like a full-time thing. But with COVID, it's so hard because with Spook Eats, what I was originally doing was traveling to these locations and, trying the food while also doing investigations. And I haven't been able to do that for almost a year now. So that's been really tough. And also, like, Paracons being canceled and book signing events being canceled. So all those things that I was able to monetize and bring in some sort of revenue, I mean, those all basically fell off the face of the earth. So I'm hoping that once COVID is kind of controlled a bit more and taken care of a bit better, that I can kind of start that back up again, because I feel like I was just really starting to like get my stride with going to locations and kind of building up that resume, and then just COVID came and just smacked me down. But one of my friends did joke saying, you were productive during quarantine, you made a human, so that's okay. So I'll take it, I guess.
Oh yeah, your son, Tobias Jedediah. I was admiring his name the other day.
You say it's a very obnoxious name, but I love it. It's so funny, because we wanted a unique name, because my name's Amanda. It's such a boring name, and my husband's name is Adam. I'm sorry, but it's a boring name. So I was like, we need a good name. So it was Tobias, and then Jed is my brother, so Jedediah is his full name. So I was like, this poor baby has got like this huge name. So on my website and stuff, we just call him Baby Spook Eats because it's easier. But
And
So I'm
the
not
other,
entirely. Go ahead.
the other thing I noticed was you seem to really like cryptids. And
I do. That was probably one of my first things I got into. Ghosts are my number one, always and forever. But cryptids definitely. I remember going to the dollar store and getting. I wish I still had it. It was this great black, leather, quote unquote, leather bound book on cryptids. And for some reason, I sold it at a garage sale years later. I wish I still had it. But I love cryptids. I think they're so weird and wacky. You know, do I put a lot of stock into them? No. I'm much more likely to believe a ghost story than I am a cryptid story. But I find them super interesting. So, yeah, I love cryptids. They're fun.
have you seen Bigfoot?
I have not. I've never seen any sort of cryptid. The closest thing that I ever saw, quote unquote, was at the Erie County Forest Preserve, and so my grandmother would tell this story of the spirit of the wolves. She was a wolf lady. That's why I have like a wolf tattoo and everything. But she would talk about the spirit of the wolves haunt these forests, blah, blah, blah. And one time while we were hiking, we did see large canines that looked like wolves. And I was like a young girl, and I was like, oh my God, it's the spirit of the wolves. So I don't think it was anything. It was probably someone's like husky or something. But so I've never actually seen anything cryptid-wise. Aside from, I did just remember something. Years ago, I was probably about 15, 16 years old. And my mom and I were driving along either Ellicott Creek or Tonawanda Creek in my hometown. And we were driving, and across the road, something went across the road. It was human shaped, but very short, probably about like 2.5, 3 feet tall. And I just remember it. If anyone knows the movie Phantasm, that's what it reminded me of. It was this little thing, and it had a cloak over its head, and it kind of glided across the road. My mom and I both saw it, and she actually kind of she didn't slam on her brakes or anything, but she kind of took her foot off the gas, and we kind of coasted for a second. We were just like, what in the world was that? So that's the only thing like that I've ever seen. I don't think it was a cryptid. I don't know what it was. We just happened to be in the right place at the right time to see something really weird. But no cryptids, no Bigfoot. I went to Loch Ness, no Loch Ness Monster. So I'm not as lucky with cryptids as I am with ghosts.
Phantasm from 1979.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, it's an old horror movie. It's great. It's so bad, it's good.
Yeah, Liz had an experience with Bigfoot.
Didn't need
really?
to talk about it.
Yes.
Yeah,
No,
I did.
no, talk about it. Talk about it.
Okay, so it was actually earlier this, I think it was last month. It was earlier last month. I was driving home. I lived in Corning, and I was coming back to Alfred area. And on the side of the road, from the Hornell exit to the Almond exit, which you don't know these places, but I'm
Yes,
gonna say
I
it
do.
anyway.
Yes, I do.
Oh,
I know the
okay, you
area.
do.
Yeah. I was like, I recognize all these names.
Yeah. I was just driving on the side on the road, and on the side of the road, kind of in the woods, there was a about 6'5" brown, I saw a shoulder and part of a head really clearly, and I was like, was that Bigfoot or was it a bear? But why would a bear be standing up in the middle of winter so close to the road?
That's so cool.
It might be Bigfoot, but that's the only thing I have to go from, and I'm like, it was Bigfoot.
I was gonna say I would cling to that. That's cool though. because so many people do see Bigfoot. That's how they describe them, you know. So I do remember when I was living in China, I visited Nepal for several days for a holiday, and one of the towns that you stop in as you're hiking along, you know, the Everest Trail, they have a temple that supposedly has a Yeti. They call it a skull, but it's like the cranium. It's like from here up. And so like we went to this temple, and the girl that I was with was definitely not into, you know, there's no such thing as a Yeti. But here I am talking with our guide, a really good friend of mine now. And, you know, I was like, oh, Kiso, like, do you like, what is the Yeti? Like, is it legit? And like the people of Nepal, at least in the Everest region, like they very much, the Yeti is real. There were stories of like recently while I was there that a young girl had gone missing in a storm, and she was gone for like 2 or 3 days. And when she came back, she said that the Yeti basically, like, she was in a cave with this creature and it kept her alive. And so they very much believe in the Yeti. So when we went to this temple and they were like, you know, oh, if you give like, you know, a $5 donation or whatever, you know, we'll open the cabinet and show you the Yeti skull. And the girl I was with, she was like, no way. And she walks away, and I was like, absolutely. So I like put my $5 in, and it was, I mean, it's interesting because everyone's always like, oh, the Yeti is white, and the Yeti's not white. The Yeti is brown, brownish red. So I got to see a quote unquote a Yeti skull. And as I saw it, I was like, oh my God, it looks like they killed Chewbacca and put it in this frame, you know. But it was like that. So that's the closest thing I've gotten to Bigfoot, is a supposed Yeti cranium in Nepal. So
That's pretty cool.
That's surprising though, because they used to say that it was like very exclusive, people could see it. Now they're doing it for $5 a person.
yeah, $5. $5 is a lot over in Nepal. I always tell people, if you can get over to Nepal, it's one of the cheapest places to visit. Like, you can live off of about $1 a day and like get tons of food, tons of drinks, and like it was totally worth it. I would pay it again.
So out of all these locations that you do for your blog, like, do you investigate all of them? Like, how does that work?
So unfortunately, most of the time, the Spook Eats locations that I visit have to be during business hours. I have to go during regular business hours because I'm also reviewing the food. So sometimes it works out where it's like during the day and no one's really there, and we can conduct a somewhat halfway decent investigation. Unfortunately, most of the time, there's other people there, which really contaminates any evidence you might find. So luckily, I've had a handful of places where they've let me come after hours, and they've given me a tour of like the basement and the attic, and I've kind of had more of the run of the place. But usually, right now, if I do an investigation of any kind, it's separate from a Spook Eats location. So like I've done plenty of investigations. But they're of like haunted locations, you know, like Iron Island is a good example, where you actually go for the purpose of investigating, not necessarily eating and then investigating. I'm hoping eventually that Spook Eats becomes like quote unquote big enough where I can do what I've done at a few places, where it's like you go at the tail end of the night, get to experience the service of the restaurant, and then get to stay into the evening, you know, later hours of the morning. So I've done that at like 1 or 2 places that has been great. So I'm hoping to be able to expand into doing that more, because I would love to really, really investigate these places more so than like trying to conduct an EVP session, but there's people downstairs that are talking or drinking and shouting. So it's not the best case scenario as of right now with the Spook Eats investigations. I love doing investigations, but I would love to be able to actually investigate these restaurants and these hotels more so. So hopefully, if you like talk to me in 5 years, I'll have more. That's my 5-year plan, is to be able to actually investigate these restaurants and these hotels that I'm getting to visit. Because the places are great about helping me experience the restaurant end of things, but it is more difficult to experience an investigation. So hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe someday, once COVID's over.
So are you able to investigate or check out the Allegheny County poorhouse down here?
So I yes and no. So I managed to find it. It took me forever to actually find where it was, and it's very close to my parents' campground. They have a campground down in that area. So I was staying at the campsite, and I was like, I'm pretty sure we're close by. Like I have the coordinates for it. Like let's punch it in and see. So we ended up finding it, and I was so excited. But unfortunately, I've been told that it's now owned by the Amish in the community, which is kind of
That
weird.
is correct.
That
Yeah.
is correct? Okay.
Mhm.
And so while we were there, of course, like we pull over to the side of the road and I'm like snapping pictures and stuff, but I'm like doing it like legally from the road, from the public property. Unfortunately, the building right next to it, the family house, which is a Amish family, I don't know if that's the family that owns it. They
It
were all
is.
out. Okay. They were all outside watching me, and I was like, okay, I'm not gonna be that person that like blatantly trespasses into this building as the family that owns it is right there. So I did get to find it. I think it even from just the side of the road, it was so cool. And I think for me, the coolest part was the investigation leading up to it. That was something I loved doing with the Haunted Atlas is I would hear these stories of these places, but like there would be no information on like where it was or how you would find it, or you would have, you know, a name of a building and then you would have to try to track down the address or the, you know, the Google map view of it. So and that's basically what I had to do with you know the asylum was kind of really track it down, and like I would remember just having Google Maps open and like literally like going down the road until you could actually find it. So to be able to like do all of that investigation to try to find it and then actually be standing in front of it was really cool. I really enjoyed it. So, but yeah, I didn't have the nerve to trespass. I'm very much a rule follower when it comes to that. So I'm like, oh, there's no trespassing signs. I'll just take a picture from the side of the road.
What about the Randy's down the river in Allegheny?
So I actually I visited Randy's a long time ago, without realizing that it was haunted. So I was there as just like a patron, as a customer. So when I was doing the Haunted Atlas, and you know, I was like going through all the different counties and stuff, and I saw that Randy's was on there. I was like, son of a pup, like. I was there. I could have investigated. I could have tried to research a bit more. So and unfortunately, when I was going around taking photos of the area, it was basically crunch time for the book. I had stupidly announced a release date. There was a Paracon that was happening November 30th. So I was like, all right, November 30th is the release date. And this was after I had gotten home from the UK. So it was basically October. So I had about a month or two to get all around Western New York trying to get all these photos and stuff. So when I went back to Randy's, I only stopped outside to snap a photo. But in my head, I'm like, man, I want to go back in because I know all the ghost stories surrounding it, and I didn't appreciate it, you know, when I was actually down there. So I'll have to get back there now that I'm not on a time crunch, with a deadline, to actually get back down there to actually like experience it and enjoy it. So that's one of those moments where I was like, oh man, like hindsight is 2020. I wish that I had known when I was there that it was haunted. I would have enjoyed it so much more.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. As a final question, I'd like to ask you your thoughts on the afterlife.
Oof. It's a very heavy question. Oh, wow. For me, and I know I've noticed this. I answer almost all of my questions starting that way. For me. But I'm not 100% sure yet. Growing up, I, was a good little Christian girl that would go to Sunday school every day, and I was taught that good people go to heaven, which is a great big castle up in the sky, and bad people will go to hell. And as I've gotten older and I've gotten to know people and experienced the world and traveled, I don't like that. I find it very, I don't know, for lack of a better term, selfish, that if you're born in the right country and you're raised with the right faith, like, you get to go to heaven. I don't like that. So for me, I have like this idea of, like, my idea of like what a ghost is, for example, is, I think the whole world works with it in threes. Like, you have like the Holy Trinity. Then you have, water, ice, and steam. You have, everything comes in threes. So I consider things kind of like the body, the mind, and the spirit. Like, when you die, your body, it's gone. Your spirit, maybe it goes to heaven, hell, nirvana, the universe, whatever. And then your mind or your consciousness could potentially stick around and stay. And I think that's what we see when we're working with the paranormal, because a lot of times, you ask them, like, what's your name? And, you feel like you're talking to another person. And I think that that's their consciousness, that's their soul. For me, I think the afterlife is simpler than we think. When my brother passed away, I came up with this idea, and I'm going to draw it really fast because I know we're running out of time. But basically, so I came up with this idea where I called it here and there. So here is right here, and there is whatever, the universe, heaven, call it what you will. So you have here and you have there. So before you're born, you're over there. You're part of the universe. Then you're born. So you cross through this line, you're born. Now you're here and you live life. And then once you die, you cross over this line again and you're back over there. And in my mind, I'm thinking that's what causes soulmates. Maybe, you meet someone for the first time and you say, oh, I feel like I've known you my whole life. Well, maybe your spirits or your souls crossed one another over there on the other side, quote unquote. So that's why you have soulmates, whether it's a friend or a lover or what have you. So for me, that's more of what I think the afterlife is, it's right here, but we just can't see it. But every so often we peek around the corner, and that's when you might see something or hear something or feel something, where you just happen to be in the right place at the right time. So for me, I'm still trying to figure out what the afterlife is. I do think that there is something. I just don't know what that is, and I'm looking forward to continuing to investigate and to try to find answers. I don't think I'll ever be fully satisfied with an answer, and I'll never know for sure until I go there myself. But I do think that there is something, whether or not it's the, that Christian idea of heaven and hell and angels and demons and stuff. I don't necessarily buy into that, but I think there's something, and I look forward to continuing to kind of brush against it to see kind of what it is. So, I don't know.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We've had so much fun talking with you and learning about you.
I'm gonna say thanks for having me. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much. I'm a chit chatter, so.
Oh, no, you're perfectly fine.
Yeah, it's always fun to work with you, and hopefully we can actually do, well, if you would like, an investigation
I was
/
gonna say,
blog together.
yeah, absolutely. I was gonna say our dates never work out. You always send me a date, and I'm always like, I have a ghost hunt. I have a ghost hunt that night. It
Yeah.
never works. That's how it always happens. Someday.
You got any plans for 2021 spring?
I have a few ghost hunts already planned, so let me know ASAP. Hopefully not at the same time.
What's your favorite place in Western New York? what would be your favorite place to investigate?
For me, it's the Ghostlight Theater. I've had so many experiences there over the years. I mean, I've been touched. I've heard my name. I've seen things. We've gotten things on film. So for me, it's this old church that's transformed into a theater. And it's amazing. It's a very nice haunting. There's nothing negative there. It's very, very nice. There, we have the spirit of a little girl there. We have the lady in red. And then we actually have two members, one of them being my brother, and the other was a gentleman who passed away in 2017. And people have seen them there too. So it's cool to have spirits from 100 years ago, but then also from just a few years ago also. So for me, hands down, it's always the Ghostlight Theater in North Tonawanda.
Okay, so for sure, we'll keep in touch. Let you know of any ideas for investigations we have, so that hopefully we can meet up sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me know. Keep me in the loop.
Okay, Liz.
Okay. So thanks everyone for joining in and listening to this week's podcast. Catch us on several different platforms, including Spotify. Just look up ASPI and UX Club. Also, make sure to follow the club on our marvelous guest on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter to keep up with the podcast as well as all of our events. If you want to join the club, just head over to the Pioneer link and join our club on the website. Again, thank you all for listening and have a great night.